Hello again and welcome back to World of Warships Legends. I am Zarkoon, and today I've got a video for you full of unexpected surprises. Well, mostly just one unexpected surprise, and you will know what it is when you see it, and I will point it out to you. But really, the reason I'm making this video, apart from one moment in this battle, which I thought was quite significant and quite unusual, I'm making it because I want to talk a little bit about the concept of power creep, which is something I've noticed, I think, affecting this game as time goes on. It's not super prominent right now, but I do think later on in the game's life cycle, it will become more apparent. And I do want to talk a little bit about the concept of power creep, what it is, and how I notice it affecting this game. But first, a little bit about what I'm doing here. I spawned to the leftmost flank on this map, and the way these spawns work, majority of the enemy team, particularly the battleships, are all out there in open water in sort of the middle of the map to the north of the Bravo cap. And what I want to do is get away from them, get myself out of their consciousness, and get behind these islands in the A cap so that I can reposition myself, turn around, and attempt to get flanking shots on pretty much the entire enemy team. I've got this Scharnhorst out here who is shooting at me, not doing too much damage to me, and he is parked broadside right in front of me. So of course he is punished for that. Guns are about to be reloaded as I turn the corner of this island and get myself out of line of sight of this Scharnhorst, although there is a destroyer over there who will keep me spotted. One more salvo out in the direction of the Scharnhorst, and let's see here what happens. Surprise! I just citadeled Scharnhorst. I can tell you with pretty much 99% certainty that until that very moment, I had never citadeled a Scharnhorst. It's unfortunate that that island was in the way, and that I wasn't able to follow my shots in and see where they hit on the ship. I don't know where they hit, so I'm not sure how that citadel was achieved, but I can tell you my guess is that it was plunging fire. That guy was at a pretty far distance. You saw the shells on the shot before that citadel hit coming down almost vertically, so one of those shells from that citadel hit must have pierced the deck armor of the Scharnhorst and entered the citadel and exploded. That is the only way I can think of how that would occur. But the main point of this video and of my talk here today, thank you for listening, is power creep. And I think the Jean Bart is an example of that. But, getting ahead of myself maybe, what is power creep? For those of you who may not know, it is a certain flaw, I suppose, in game balance design where content released later in the game's life cycle tends to be more powerful than content released earlier in the game's cycle. And, this occurs in online multiplayer games like World of Warships Legends that have regular updates that add or expand on the game by adding more playable units. And, of course, the concept of power creep also refers to the average increase in relative power for all released content in the game throughout its life cycle. So this change, this power creep, can happen slowly, and it might not be noticed by most of the players in its beginning stages until it becomes, readily apparent, and until people start making comparisons between new units and old units. And I think you can look at the Jean Bart and take that as an example of power creep relative to a ship that was released earlier in the game's life cycle. Not much earlier, I suppose, but earlier, the Richelieu. Now, the Jean Bart and the Richelieu, they are sister ships, they were historically. And they are statistically almost identical. There's a little bit of variance in certain stats. I think the Richelieu is a little bit faster than the Jean Bart, for example. But they have the same guns, basically the same rate of fire. The only thing that sets the Richelieu and Jean Bart apart is that the Jean Bart has access to the reload booster consumable, which is a very potent, very dangerous consumable, and one that allows relatively skilled players to mete out a lot of punishment to other players who find themselves giving broadside to the Jean Bart. You see, I deleted that enemy Jean Bart in the span of a couple salvos, sped up by the reload booster, and the last hit being a citadel that took him out. So, why play the Richelieu without the reload booster when you can play pretty much a functionally identical ship with the Jean Bart that does have the reload booster? That, I think, is an example of power creep. And relative to all the other ships in the game, take the Scharnhorst, for example. You remember a few months ago when I suppose maybe the German lines were just in pre-release and being pushed out to the general public. The Scharnhorst was a formidable ship that could absolutely dominate the battlefield in some cases. And it's still a formidable ship. But it doesn't seem, at least in my opinion, to inspire the same fear in players, and I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if it's because everybody's gotten wise to the Scharnhorst ways and know how to deal with it, or if it's because there are very, very powerful ships like the Jean Bart in play now, which can absolutely beat the crap out of a Scharnhorst despite its turtleback armor and high rate of fire. So I think power creep is slowly making its way into this game. I think from watching all the Jingles videos that I watch and knowing a little bit about the state of the game on the PC, World of Warships, there are certain lines in that game, I think the Soviet battleship line, for example, which some players regard as overpowered. I think the Soviets are supposedly the most accurate and some of the hardest hitting battleships in the game, and at least one of the ships has, from what I understand, ridiculous godlike armor that is very difficult to penetrate and get any damage on. So if we ever see the Soviet line make an appearance in this game, which we probably will, we might start to notice a little bit more power creep in the game. In my mind, the Iowa was the most powerful Tier 7 battleship for a good long time in this game, but I think it has been surpassed now with the introduction of the Jean Bart, and I think that trend is going to continue as time goes on. So it's something to be aware of. It's not necessarily a huge problem with this game right now, and it may never be a huge problem, but I think it is something that is occurring and something to watch out for. And I think you can even see it with the commander system, with these new Azur Lane commanders, for example. Take the Nelson commander, who I just unlocked in a crate from one of the missions. Now, the Nelson commander is not a standard battleship commander. Basically, for the game's entire life cycle, there have been two types of battleship commanders. One which is more offensively minded, that will extend the range on your guns and increase the accuracy, and one brawler, defensive type minded commander who will increase the rate of fire and the tankiness of the ship. But now, you saw it with Henry J. Hyde in the Halloween event, and now with these Azur Lane commanders, we are getting sort of hybrid commanders that combine the best of both worlds with an additional unique trait in these commanders. And I've unlocked the Nelson commander. I've been using Charles Madden on the Nelson, for example, but I am going to test out the anime Ezerlane Nelson commander on the Nelson and see how that goes. And I suspect that she is going to provide the Nelson with the optimum build over what you could achieve with either Charles Madden or Andrew Cunningham. So we're even noticing a little bit of power creep as far as commanders go. Although, even as powerful as the Jean part is, it is nice to know that players are getting smarter and have figured out effective ways to check the Jean Bart. This Jean Bart in front of me and his Amagi earlier and that Scharnhorst all fired high explosive at me, forced me to use my damage control a number of times, and reduced me to 560 hit points. So countering these ships can be done, at least now, so that's nice. And I guess that's the battle there, and there's my thoughts on power creep. So you guys can tell me what you think in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Got a lot of World of Warships Legends content coming all the time. But before we end, let's take a look at the results screen. 156,000 damage done, 3,000 base experience. Not too shabby. Alright, well thank you, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.